Alright, hello again to anyone watching these Kaijudo videos, and welcome back to another duel video between myself and KRICK. We've been playing a lot recently, so I have a number of matchups that I wanted to show, and this is another one with one of the decks I actually profiled briefly in the, I think the Untuned deck dump video I did a while back. This was the Squilly deck that I had been experimenting with. The previous version had a few more corrupted stuff, but with the suggestion of someone in the comments, I decided to move towards a little bit more of the Broodmother focus, play some Anjax as well, which is just a great mid-range beat stick, and I decided to trim down away from the corrupt stuff. I moved away from Seneschal, I moved away from Vicious Squilly, and as a result, this is where I ended up. Because I'm playing Broodmother, I decided to go try out Joko instead of Terrapit. We'll see how that change feels, but I felt like I didn't want to play the full 6 spells, but I still wanted enough darkness mana. Just to go over the brief idea, the main reason I wanted to build this deck in the first place, again, was just to build a deck that really utilized Squilly Scourge well. It's one of my favorite cards in the game, and what I had felt like was the best place for it was in a tempo deck, similar to how it was utilized back in the day in things like in decks like Lightwater Dark Tempo, where you saw it at the top end. However, I think in the open format, it's a little bit too expensive now, and as a multi-civ, a clunky 9 drop, it's a little bit harder to utilize adequately in the open format, in my view at least. So I felt like in order to properly utilize it, I wanted to look at finding ways to accelerate our mana, especially within a tempo shell, and I felt I came with the idea of this kind of corrupted wild veggie package of Bad Apple, and Bronze Arm Renegade was the best way to do that. So by having our 2-drops be these really powerful creatures that when they die they go to Mana Zone. Mana Pod Beetle was a card that was consistently played as a 2-drop in tempo decks, as one of the go-tos there, not just because it was a mega bug, but even in decks like Bant Tempo. I believe Earth Power or Carl Machodo's second place list from the second championship, I believe he was just playing Bant Tempo, and he played Mana Pod Beetle without Hive Queen in his deck. And there was just definitely a precedent for that card to be just a solid 2-drop. And the reason for that is these cards are just hard to interact with removal, because if your opponent's just trying to deal with your creatures with things like Bone Blades or even like Snake Trap, Waylay, Fire Removal, all that kind of stuff, the fact that these cards, they never, you do maybe lose the resource in play, but you never actually lose the full resource because they go to your mana zone. So if your opponent's spending a removal, they're basically going -1 in those transactions. So it makes it difficult to grind you out of resources. And the reason, and then they also just help you accelerate into powerful plays like Finbar. On top of that, they're both bait for Anjac, which is just a really nice thing. And if you can ever curve like any of your 2-drops into a Tricky Turnip, or even just go 2-drop into Bad Apple, it's just such a great start where you can generate so much extra mana. Bad Apple, especially on a clear board, is just a really, really powerful card. It ramps you into Finbar, and then it sets you up to take advantage of Squilly Scourge as well. So that's sort of where I was going with this list. Sumo Artichoke, a great Shield Blast creature that you can dump out into play, has synergy with the Wild Veggie package that's going on here. And the rest of the card, a lot of traditional tempo tools. You have Finbar is just the powerful 6-drop. You have all the Rusalkas as interactive cards. Bone Blades, just the only spell in the deck. I felt like it was necessary to interact with some of the cheap blockers, especially things like Aqua Strider that can really stall this deck's aggressive plan. So I decided to go with Bone Blades. Also just helps a lot against any of like the 4-mana Evos that can come down out of the opponent. So just a really potent card in certain matchups and for solving certain problematic cards. So I felt like it was a spell worth playing here. Gloomhollow looks a little out of place. One of the primary reasons to play it in the previous list was that it also doubled as bait for Vicious Squilly. But here it's mainly just a hedge as a darkness mana and a card that can block, like just giving us at least one blocker in our deck so that we can have some play against some of the rush decks or aggro decks like that. Between Gloomhollow and a bunch of Shield Blasts and a bunch of tempo tools, like hopefully we can survive long enough to land a Squilly, even just with all this ramp that largely will go uncontested to some extent, especially against the really aggressive decks. And then being able to just survive long enough to land a Squilly is sort of the game plan there, or even just race them with these powerful Shield Blast creatures. So Gloomhollow may be out of place. In my view, this is probably one of the biggest flex slots in the deck as it stands. I think it could definitely be the case that you don't even need the extra darkness mana. But with 6 shield blasts and then multiple Squilly Scourges, it's very likely you end up with 1 Squilly mana to cast a second, and then all these Jokos are just pretty much immediate land drops as well. So it might be even better, I think, to just increase up the water count so that we don't have to throw our bad apples and bronze arm renegades, and like all of our water cards are super powerful, super important. So it might be better to have some other sort of maybe somewhat situational water cards or something along those lines, just so that we can mana those to play our better water cards early game, so that we can consistently unlock water on turn 2. So I feel like this could easily change to a different card, because we're basically just a water nature tempo aggro deck splashing vicious Squillis and some shield blast. So I don't know if we need these Gloom Hollows, but with all that said, they are still really powerful for certain matchups. So that's kind of the generic overview of the deck here. And the deck KRICK is playing, once again, still just trying out and testing with the David DiLorenzo Light Water Nature pile list, which I've talked about a fair amount so far. Going into the matchup, I mean, traditionally you would expect sort of the tempo decks, and we've seen with like the Water Light deck that I've played against this pile deck in a past video, you would expect sort of the tempo deck to be favored, but here we don't have Cyber Scamp and Keeper of Laws, and on top of that, like the things like Aqua Strider, Full Metal Lemon, they just really hamper Bad Apple's effectiveness, especially as a way to translate into extra resources, and they can kind of brick wall things like early drops like Turnip. So we'll see how this matchup plays out. We're kind of maybe on the more underpowered side for some of these kind of traditional tempo archetypes that we would expect. So with all that said, we will jump into game 1 here between myself and KRICK. Of course, I'm on the top here playing the Veggie deck, and we will see who won the die roll. I believe it was me, if I remember correctly, and I just throw down the Bone Blades. Makes sense. The rest of my cards are all just high value cards in this matchup. KRICK here, Manners of Piercing, makes sense as well. It's a multi-civ, so you kind of want to get out of the way. On top of that, you don't have like the Strider or Lemon that really makes it effective as an interactive piece. I'm out of the Sumo Artichoke, which is a nice way to unlock nature. Here, Cassiopeia is a really nice card to hold on to for the late game. In this matchup, Keeper of Laws isn't really necessary, so I could see throwing that down. I would like to have access to Gloom Hollow as a play potentially, although it's not the most effective in the face of Bad Apple. But I don't mind the Sprout either. If you draw, like at this point, if you draw any other nature card, I think almost every other nature card you'd rather cast or hold on to. So I don't mind putting that Sprout in mana at all. So Tendril Grasp. Maybe the one nature card you might have wanted to have kept, or that you could have drawn that would have made you not want to throw that Sprout in mana. But even then, it's still going to be a nice tool to get rid of these tricky turnips. So totally reasonable. Despite what I said about Keeper of Laws not being the best card you want to play, while whiffing on Darkness mana means Gloom Hollow is a lot less effective now, and you're going to need something to contest the board, and it looks like if you're not having Bone Blades or any of those plays, Keeper of Laws is a fine enough backup. But I get exactly what I would want, which is an uncontested, no skirmish blockers on the field. I just get a super clean break with Bad Apple, which is the problem is when your opponent bricks walls you with Striders, it just makes this curve very difficult to leverage, and you're super weak to piercing with this Bad Apple in play. It just loses to all of those skirmish blockers and a piercing judgment, or you just play it and then don't get any value out of it because they're brick walling you, and then they can just Bone Blades the Bad Apple off. So you might have to hold it in your hand, at which point you're maybe weak to something like a Mesmerize coming down. So the skirmish blockers are super important from the pile side. But in the draws where I don't have Turnip, I think one of the things, I don't know if it'll be seen this matchup, but a common thing I might do in certain situations, it might be a more common play out of the Veggie deck, the Wild Veggie deck, where you have even more powerful like top end stuff that is a little bit cheaper, like Cornucopia and Swift Regeneration. But a common play might even be to just attack your pesky pineapples and bronze arm renegades into skirmish blockers, let your opponent trade, but those are still two, like you're still getting a card out of it. Like it's still fine because you ramp yourself by 2 in those scenarios, and you don't actually lose a card. You lose board presence. So part of the reason you might not want to do that is if you have a Finbar coming down that can make better use out of those creatures. But if you don't, it can often be the right play to just turn those creatures in play into mana, depending on your hand, of course. Again, that's probably more important to know when you're playing the wild veggie deck, where they get all this stuff back out of their mana zone. They have more powerful like individual combo pieces that they can assemble with that extra mana. So a little bit of a different situation, whereas this deck is just much more about board presence, so you don't want to make that exchange as often, but it's still something you can totally do because you're not actually losing card advantage at the very least. So here the laws comes down. Makes sense. So here I unfortunately draw a dual civ, which kind of really sucks because I felt like I just win the game on the spot. If that's an untapped mana, I slam the Finbar. Both my creatures attack and draw me 2 resources. Like I felt like I was just I mean, it just feels like there's almost no way I lose that game at that point. Makes sense. I mean, I threw this Cephalia down. Or no, I think I might have ramped into... I'm not sure. No, I threw this down with the idea of being able to cast the Finbar the following turn, which made sense. It looked kind of bad there, but I feel like it would have been a mistake to hold the Cephalia over the Finbar because, like, I only have... like 8, like there's only like or 7 more multi-civs in my deck, I think, or even less than that, 6 or 7. So I think it was right to do that. Maybe I could have I had to play an untapped mana the previous turn, and I want to hold this Squilly anyways. And that's why I put down the Finbar this turn. That might be a mistake as well. I could have just passed and done this, but going about it this way means I can just land the Squilly the following turn. So I feel like that was pretty appealing. But I could have just waited, held the Finbar, played the Finbar next turn anyways. It's still going to be really good. Get the Finbar in play, which is really strong too when I have Squilly to follow that up with, because then, of course, I'm drawing cards after playing Squilly to discard both people's hands, and it just puts me infinitely far ahead. And that, like, part of the problem too is here I'm also putting myself in a position where, like, maybe I don't get to untap with if I just draw another multi-civ, that's bad, but at the same time I'm probably not going to need to have that dynamic be at play, just because KRICK can't really pass up on the opportunity to kill one of these creatures and put it in my mana zone. So here lemon comes down, double lemon, and so yeah, it's looking kind of bad that I mean, if I wanted to make the attack, I could have just like played not attacked at all, just played the Renegade, or even just mana the Renegade and passed. So maybe this line was too aggressive on my part, but it's working out mostly fine. Like now, KRICK's on 6 mana, and he's gonna have maybe 2 cards in hand after I break these shields this turn. And now I'm gonna put him in a spot. If he doesn't have Shield Blast right here, he's gonna be in a spot where like I just have a ton of live draws. I have 2 more Finbars, I have a Bone Blades, I have 2 Jokos, I have I think 3 Rusalkas and the Psychic Predator. I have a ton of different draws. On top of that, I could draw Broodmother that draws me into any of those, or I could draw Broodmother that draws me into Anjak as a fast attacker. But he does hit Shield Blast, he needs a Shield Blast to have a chance to survive. And here, okay, he draws Terror Pit. So he should just Terror Pit my my bad apple here. He decides not to, which I think is a from a mistake. And he doesn't get punished because I can't kill him this turn, so I have to pass. Like, I understand maybe you want to keep it as a mana card, but you're 2 drops off of being able to play an Andromeda anyways. I feel like you need to just like, I mean, you're gonna end up in the same. This was the strength of the line I took for sure. Was just I put KRICK in a spot where oh, okay, never mind. Or what am I? Or sorry, I forgot what happened here. I think KRICK made for some reason he thought Tricky Turnip gave everything hexproof, which was kind of busted. Which would be kind of busted. So he thinks he's just dead on board here because he can't kill anything. Realistically, he's still pretty far behind because I mean, I'm in a spot where I just have infinite top decks to kill him this turn after he removes one of my creatures, but he thinks he's just dead on board. But of note, like if he had just pitted this Bad Apple the turn before, then I draw, play Turnip, then on his turn he draws Boneblades as the Renegade, and now I'm in a spot where like I keep have to draw passing or whatever. And this was the strength of my or draw play creature, pass it back, and then he has to keep finding answers. This was the strength of my line that I took with the Squilly Scourge, where it just puts him in a spot where like he can't make, like he was only on 6 mana when I did that, so which is the strength of Bad Apple, where I just get so far ahead on land drops that I can do whatever I want. But it just puts him in a spot where he has to balance, like just because he's on 0 shields, he has to balance answering every single creature I'm going to top deck and play, which I have a ton of. And then on top of that, he also needs to hit his land drops so that he can actually resolve an Andromeda at some point to get back in the game. But he just doesn't really have the ability to do that when he's being forced to answer every creature I play. So I just put him in a spot like this where his decisions are kind of made for him. And I think he needed to Terra Pit, but I understand not wanting to do it because you do value the mana. And maybe that actually is the right play. Like you just hope I whiff, and then you can hit like multiple land drop. Like you have to hope I whiff 2 turns in a row, and then because it's just a losing battle to just like keep trying to hope to draw infinite removal, and then eventually I'll draw something to win the game. So you know what, KRICK probably did make the right play in hindsight. Like you just hold your cards, and then just hope you get lucky and that I whiff back to back, so you can actually maybe hit land drop into Andromeda. So maybe something to debate there. You'd have to really look, maybe break down a little bit more in depth than I'm gonna right now what like the cards in the actual deck are that you could be playing towards. But a couple of different ways to approach. But he made the mistake of thinking that for some reason he thought everything had hexproof, so he just conceded in that spot. But now he knows that that's not the case. But again, like he was going to be a pretty large underdog from that position to actually get back in the game. So game 2 here, leading on Squillis, makes sense. Going to be tough to translate that card into an effective one in this matchup. So I have the decision. Kind of a tough mana decision. I want to keep all these Squillies so I can use them. I want to be able to cast Bronze Arm Renegade turn 2, but I also want both my Bad Apple and my Renegade. So if I play the Joko in mana, which is the worst card in my hand, I just can't cast Renegade next turn. But the question is, do I really need to actually cast the Renegade next turn? I can do something like play Squillis this turn. If I draw a nature card, an untapped nature mana, I can play Bronze Arm and I kind of get everything I want. And I get a multi-civ out of my hand at the same time, although I lose a potent card for the matchup. I could also just play Renegade, give up on my 2-drop, hope I draw like maybe another Renegade or a Tricky Turnip or a Pesky Pineapple in the next couple turns, and then keep the high value Bad Apple. Or I could just play Bad Apple now, guarantee that I cast a Renegade on turn 2, and then play Joko, but this Renegade's not going to accomplish too much without the bad apple, and especially if my opponent just plays a blocker. Even though I have like Rusalka to bounce, I think maybe I feel like that's just not a good decision because it's just not going to accomplish too much. Like I can put on some pressure and it's going to be decent, but I feel like just playing the Squillis gives me the out to have everything I need if I just draw an untapped nature mana, which there's a fair amount of in the deck. Like I probably have like at least like a 40 maybe percent chance to have that happen. Probably less. I probably like a 33, 35, something in that range. So it's not bad odds that happens. And if it doesn't, like even if I draw just another nature dual civ, like another one of these renegades or bad apples, at least I have the information and I can still just put that nature multi-civ in mana and then just cast a renegade on turn 3. Like it would still be fine to go multi-civ nature card on turn 2 and then play renegade turn 3 into turn 4 bad apple. That's still like a fine card or a fine curve. So I think just giving up the bad apple like this was a mistake, and I think it's probably more important than the Squillis Scourge. But maybe not. Maybe the Squillis is like a more important like game card. It's like way more important that I guarantee that I have access to like one of these Squillis Scourges than necessarily ramping up with like, the bad apple. But tough call. Pretty tough mana decision there. I mean, I could have even mana'd like one of the Finbars or Rusalkas, and then just hope to do the same thing where I untap nature mana. If I don't draw a nature mana, I can maybe play the Joko in mana turn 2, and then I could potentially and then I could wait till turn 3 to hopefully draw a nature mana, and if I draw anything, whether it be a multi-civ or an untapped mana, I can play the Renegade. I think the key thing there was this Renegade didn't really need to come down on turn 2, so I probably could have waited an extra turn to decide on my mana decision, and in doing that I probably should have I probably should have mana'd, if not the Squillis because I feel like it might be too important of a card for this matchup, maybe just like one of the Rusalkas. Like that might have been a better mana decision, one of those ways to give me the time, and that way like I could probably put Joko on turn 2. I mean, I could even just mana Joko turn 2 and just say like I'm 100% not casting this Renegade on turn 2. Like that might actually be the best play, is just get that extra bit of information. So interesting spot. I'd like to hear people's thoughts on maybe what the best mana decision. I think in hindsight, you know what, I might just say screw the 2-drop, let's just play Joko turn 1 and maintain this hand as it is. Interesting that KRICK put the lemon down. I think this is another spot. It seems like he's valuing this like ramp plan, but this is a spot where I'm pretty sure you should just play the lemon. Tendril Grasp is kind of a nice card, but like you don't need to cast the ramp for Reap and Sow on turn 4, especially when you're not like setting up a play like Lyra. Like he is setting up a play like Tendril Grasp, which is pretty fair, but Tendril Grasp isn't like even that good in these spots because it just gives me extra mana. Like this isn't necessarily the best like 2-for-1. He's effectively going -1. He does answer my board presence, but it gives me the ability to play stronger cards. So I don't know if I like this line more than just walling up with curving like had he curved like lemon the previous turn into Keeper of Laws. I think just walling up like that, when I've already given him maybe a few extra cards from attacking, I think that might be just a better position for him. Because now I've developed my mana zone for kind of free, and I've already translated those creatures into like a decent amount of pressure. Like I've already converted them into a few shield breaks, and now they're just mana cards. Like they're off the table, so they're not effective in terms of like getting advantage out of Finbar, but at the same time, like KRICK hasn't gotten any traction on the board, and now he's staring down a turnip. for which like lemon is one of the better answers to. But I mean, at the same time, like he's pursuing this Andromeda plan and he's getting there pretty quickly. But I gotta translate this Finbar pretty nicely, draw a card. So this is kind of like the problem with like the deck I'm playing. It feels a little bit clunky with like just splashing all these Darkness Shield Blasts that are kind of just splashing Terra Pit is like, it's a good Shield Blast, and like Joko a bit worse of a Shield Blast, a bit worse of a card overall, but and it's kind of like, it's just kind of, I mean, I've drawn 3 this game, so it hasn't looked good, but that's kind of the problem when you're just playing all these expensive Shield Blasts, like an Artichoke as well. It just gives you like a kind of a bad half of your deck to draw. So that's kind of the argument against them, but at the same time, like it's just still fulfilling its role as a mana. And it's a decent card here because I could use it to answer Andromeda. But I think the better play is just to answer the Andromeda with Finbar. And I opt to keep the Bone Blades because it's just a more efficient answer to, like I have Rusalka to answer another Andromeda, and the Bone Blades is an efficient answer to something like Strider. So now I just have infinite cards. I have a potential fast attacking Double Breaker to come down with Anjak. I think the Reapinso makes sense to just put down here and then just cast the Eternal Haven or the Andromeda. Eternal Haven. Interesting. So a ton of options. So if I Bone Blades this Strider, I could also, like I could just send in, he blocks something and I break 2 shields. And I could also play something like Bad Apple in the same turn. Unfortunately, I can't really Anjak unless I mean, I could just play Anjak, but then it would just like trade off with this in the same spot. So what I could do is like, I mean, I could Boneblade Strider, play Anjak, or Rusalka Strider, but I kind of want to hold that for the Andromeda. There's Boneblade Strider, Anjak, Evolve. I could attack if he blocks the Anjak. Then I could like summon out one of the other creatures. I could summon back out the turnip. And then I draw 2 cards, and then I can break 2 shields. And then he's on 0 shields. But I also want to hold this so that I can get a clean, like a double break on the Andromeda shields if they come down. So this is like a pretty tough spot. Like that play kind of seems appealing. Just chump attack the Anjak into the Haven. If he takes the 2 shields, then he risks like just losing on the spot if he doesn't have a shield blast. So he's kind of forced to block. And then I can summon out the turnip, and then I can go for the last 2 shields with my Finbars. If both those breaks go through, like on his turn, he either attacks with like he'll just like likely just play Andromeda, get back 2 shields, and then kill one of the Finbars with his Haven. And then at that point, like I don't have the Anjak anymore as a double breaker to come down and break those 2 shields. So now I'm just staring with like, I have Finbar and Tricky Turnip against 2 shields with like against an Andromeda and a Haven, and I can't really I can break those 2 shields, but then I'm losing my board. And it doesn't matter. Like, yeah, it just feels like that's just not good. So I need to save the Anjak to try to keep it for a clean hit on his shields after he's played Andromeda. So I felt like the best way to do that was to just make a similar play, but rather than like just kind of keeping the Anjac, losing the Anjac but keeping the turnip on board, I guess I decided to just keep the Anjac in my hand instead. Now I think playing this was that was just a weird thing to do. I could have just played the bad apple instead of the pineapple. Oh, I drew for no. I think I drew by accident. That card shouldn't be in my hand there. Then I drew one. So I mistakenly drew for the Finbar because I forgot that he had just killed one. But both attacks did go through. A note about why that was also good is because when I was discussing the previous line where I chump attack with Anjac and then try to break both his shields with my Finbars, if he has a shield blast, that gets stopped. Whereas it's much less likely that happens when I attack with both Finbars, and then when I attack with both Finbars and then attack with turnip after, because when we just saw that sequence, it basically, unless he has like Storm Spark down, it basically guarantees that I break both shields. So it was much more important. It was a little bit better to serve that purpose by doing that. And he could let the first attack on the Finbar go through to try to stop me from to try to hit high roll on a shield blast there, which I think might be worth it, to be honest. But by killing the first Finbar, you give me less draws. Like I get one less off the turnip, and I should get one less off of the Finbar. Although I mistakenly drew anyways, so I should have like 2 less draws, but instead I only gave myself 1 less draw. So that was definitely a punt on, or not a punt, but definitely a mistake on my part that's kind of affected the game. But maybe it's better, rather than trying to deny those 2 draws when I already have like a number of cards in hand, maybe it's better to just try to give yourself the chance to have that shield blast, because it's much harder to kill you with 3 shields after you play Andromeda than it is with 2, especially through things like Ostrike. So I think that could have been a consideration there. Maybe a little bit unintuitive because it just seems pretty blatantly obvious that you would just kill the Finbar off the first attack, stop the draws, but worth looking for spots like that where you can give yourself a better chance to stabilize. But like yeah, this pineapple could have just been a bad apple and given me 1 more ramp as well off the turnip. So maybe a mistake on my part, but at the same time, I kind of get that mana back if he finds a way to answer it, and if not, then I have my bait for Anjac ready to go. Kind of unfortunate that I didn't draw into a bait for Anjac here, but So Andromeda is going to come down for sure, but now you have the choice between like play Strider or play Mesmerize. So mesmerizing, I mean, against 6-card hands, you might expect some redundancy in there. Maybe it's not worth it. Play Strider and then just wall up. But you're kind of weak to a Squillis if you do that. The other approach would be to recognize like this Haven can just kill the turnip or kill the Finbar and put this Strider in a place. Then you have, and then you mesmerize. Maybe probably going to be forced to take this Squillis. Like let's assume that. Then you can attack, kill this probably tricky turnip, and then you have Andromeda and an untapped Aqua Strider and 2 shields versus these 2 guys. And then like it kind of seems tough. Like I would basically just be in a spot where like I would be able, like if I go Rusalka, Yeah, I would just be in a spot where I just hope he doesn't have Shield Blast. It's kind of the same, I guess. Like, I just Rusalka the blocker, and then tap the blocker to Ostrike after playing Anjac on the Pineapple, and then I'm just hoping he doesn't have a Shield Blast, because I just go Evolve here, Rusalka the blocker, attack with Anjac, tap the Rusalka to Ostrike, and then just break and hope he doesn't have anything. So, and then obviously, he could just Mesmerize this, but if he does that, then he does give himself an extra turn, because he could Mesmerize the Anjac and then leave me with 2 creatures in play or something like that. But the problem there is then I just play Squillis, his whole hand's gone. I can attack and draw. Maybe he kills the Finbar instead, but I can break both his shields. And then, I don't know, maybe he's in a better position after that if he gets like an Andromeda off these. So maybe like Mesmerize take the Anjac is better than Mesmerize take the Squillis. But it's really tough to say. But as it is right now, if he just plays Strider and passes, so the fact that he attacked anyways makes me think like he probably should have just Mesmerized. Yeah, like that. Okay, for sure. Like you could consider walling up instead. At which case like Squillis is going to do a lot of harm, because then Squillis comes down, discards everything in his hand, and I get to probably break all his shields, go for game at the same time. And then I don't know if I can actually go for game. Like, yeah, because I have to tap the Squillis with the Finbar attack and then tap that. So I would break all his shields and draw 2 cards off the Finbar, and then he'd be in a tough spot. But if he doesn't attack here, so if he does attack, like I think you would have just been able to cast this Mesmerize. I think it's better to just cast this Mesmerize than it is to hope to draw a second blocker off of the Haven trigger. So I would have probably done that, taken either the Anjac or Squillis. Tough to say which one is exactly better, because like the position gets really hazy when you start talking about not taking the Anjac, because then I resolve my Squillis, but then he gets a couple cards off of his shields and he still has all these things in play. So he's in a decent position, but then I also got to draw 2 cards. So it kind of really comes down to what he draws off of his draw step and his shields. If he draws another Andromeda, he probably even wins the game. But if not, he might be in a losing position. If he leaves the Anjac, or if he takes the Squillis and the Anjac will just threaten lethal on his position if he doesn't have a Shield Blast there. So it might actually be better. But I just kind of go with the play I discussed, where this is effectively the same as the line where he takes Squillis with Mesmerize. And this is why it was like really crucial that I held the Anjac from the previous turn. And I get there. Sweet. So a tight game at the end there, a few options. KRICK had like a 10 card hand to digest, so a lot of things going on. And then I myself had like an 8 card hand, tons of resources on both sides, and a well fought game for sure. So really cool to see that matchup play out. I think for the most part played out mostly straightforward. Some very tough mana decisions on my side at the beginning of the game. Maybe a few different lines that KRICK could have taken, especially with maybe the Tendril Grasp and Reap and Sow. But even that is like, that's not even particularly a bad play by any means. I think maybe Aqua Stride or playing Lemon into Keeper of Laws would have been better, but it's still a kind of tough call. But yeah, definitely some really, really good games there between those 2 decks. So as always, thanks to everyone for watching the videos. I hope it was informative or enjoyable to see some of these decks in action, especially a lot of the more kind of brews, I guess, that I've been putting up against the Lightwater Dark Nature pile deck that KRICK's been playing. So he's been doing a good job learning that deck, and then I've been getting the opportunity to experiment with a bunch of other archetypes that I've been messing around with. So Once again, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoy the video.